Hello everyone, this is Valerie Nagy and this is my presentation on tort liability for Module 13. When we look at a definition of tort liability, Nathan Essex describes tort liability as an actionable or civil wrong committed against one person by another that is independent of contract. Now I'm going to explore a couple different tort liability cases. The first one deals with a teacher who, although is a teacher in the school, is acting as a substitute teacher for another class. During this class, students are being disruptive during a spelling test, and the teacher asks those students to leave. Shortly after that, another student causes a disruption, and the teacher asks that student to leave. The student refuses, and then the teacher approaches the student to remove him from class. At that point, the student stood up, and there was a little bit of contact between the student and the teacher, and the student proceeded to fall down, hit a podium, and obtain some minor injuries. Now, if this happened in my school, the reactive measures that I think would result would be talking to the teacher and having them attend a training on what is an acceptable way to be hands-on with a student, and then what are acceptable instances that you can be hands-on with a student. In my district, we're very specific about that, and I don't think it would be unacceptable to expect the teacher to go to some type of training so that they are fully aware of when they are allowed to be hands-on with a student. Proactive measures, I would want to put a standard procedure together that all teachers understand, and if a student does need to be removed from class, the procedure would be to first ask the student. If they refuse, then you would be able to contact the office, and somebody in the office, either a resource officer, principal, or other administrator, would be able to come to class and remove the student. And then when we look at a set of professional ethics, I think it would be extremely important for all teachers to understand the behaviors that would justify removing a student from class, and then also how to go about removing a student from class, just so that everything is understood and all the teachers are following the procedures we have put in place. The next case deals with physical education, and since that is my field, it is an interesting situation to look at and to be aware of, especially since this is not a single incident. This does happen more frequently than I think people realize. There was a rather intense class happening, and the teacher stopped the students to talk to them about their choices and behaviors at the end of class. Then he dismissed the students to go get changed, which is very typical. And this is where it gets interesting, because some school districts require the teacher to stay out of the locker room, because when students are changing and having an adult there, it makes them feel uncomfortable, where other school districts require the teacher to be in the locker room, and then students can go to the bathroom stalls to change if they're uncomfortable with an adult being there. So that's something where you do have to be aware of what the standard procedure is for your district. So this teacher dismissed the students to the locker room. At that point, students got into a disagreement, and a student was pushed into a locker and then a bench and did sustain some severe personal injuries. Now, if this happened at my school, I would first look at the locker room and figure out, is there a way to change how students' lockers are assigned? Sometimes teachers put all the students who are in one class in the same area, because that's just how the lockers were assigned. You're all in there at the same time, you get this section of lockers. But I think it would be helpful to look and see, could you space the students out so there's 1, 2, maybe even 3 lockers in between every student, giving students more personal space so that if there was some sort of disagreement, they would be able to have a little bit more space in between them and feel a little bit safer. A proactive measure I would want to see is, if there was a class that was a little heated, then the students go into the locker room and shifts. Now, this would take more planning on the teacher's part, because you only have a limited amount of time for students to go change after class and be able to get to their next class. But if you're seeing students getting too competitive, I think that would be helpful. Now, when we look at professional ethics, I think it's important to work with the entire district's physical education staff to come up with some consistent and clear rules about the locker rooms. And that way the students know the expectations from the first time they set foot in the locker room, and those stay consistent throughout their years in education so that they understand what is acceptable, what is unacceptable, and then the consequences for those actions. The next scenario is taking place in a music lesson. And I think it's really important to think about the fact that there's not a lot of hands-on interactions in classrooms. If you're in a physical education setting in the gym, you're going to be a little more hands-on depending on the activity, but you also have a lot more space. So when you're in a traditional classroom, that is something that I really want to focus on in this case. They're playing the game London Bridge is Falling Down, so two students are holding hands and moving another student around. In that situation, the student was pushed around quite intensely, and the students actually managed to push the student into a bookcase. He sustained severe injuries and needed stitches for his injuries. Now, reactive measures. First would be a discussion with all teachers, and I would want to talk about when is it acceptable to use hands-on activities in a traditional classroom setting. And I think it would be a pretty rare occasion. Yes, this is a fun game and this is something that kids should be able to play. However, with today and kids and just how they interact, I could see it being a problem. And classrooms are not that big, at least in my school. We don't have a lot of space. Our music room is not that big. So it's not that unusual to think that a student could be pushed into a bookshelf or something like that. So I would really want to talk about using hands-on lessons and when that's appropriate and when that's acceptable. So then a proactive measure would be to put a policy in place that teachers are a part of creating so that everybody fully understands not only when is it acceptable, but then what you're expected to do as a classroom teacher and how observant you need to be to make sure that you are removing those risks or limiting those risks, and then removing students if they are being a little too energetic throughout the activity. So this goes right into the professional ethics, because having that policy in place that the teachers created, everyone can be on board and feel comfortable with the expectations and fully understand the risks. And especially now with teachers not always having all the support of the parents and the parents really believing their child first, it can be very dangerous for a teacher to have an incident like this, and then the parents would come after the teacher and only believe what the student is saying. So it's something that you really need to be very aware of. The next incident took place in Canada, so some of the situations may be slightly different just with the way the court handled this, but the students were participating in a game of field hockey, and when you play field hockey, you have a wooden stick, and it is quite hard, and it can do damage. And so we see in this situation that there was a student who had missed multiple days leading up to the final round robin tournament of field hockey. And although the student had some experience in ice hockey, he didn't have experience in field hockey. From my point of view, I feel like the student should have enough knowledge to understand how to be safe, but the court ruled that he did not have enough knowledge to be safe in this situation. And the student was running after another student who was about to shoot, and student A, who was injured, was behind student B, and student B brought their hockey stick up, and then it hit student A in the nose, and it caused a lot of bleeding. The student went to the hospital for their injuries. So the first thing I would want to do is figure out a policy for if a student did miss multiple days of physical education. It's always hard because you want students to be active, you want them to be participating, and if they're missing a lot of school, you want them to get a chance to participate in this rather fun activity, but you have to make sure they're being safe. So I would say if a student missed more than 2 days of physical education instruction in a row, then the student would not be allowed to participate until they have had an opportunity to work with the equipment on their own off to the side and get comfortable with the equipment and then fully understand the rules and procedures and how to be safe while participating in this activity. Now, a proactive measure to help make sure all students fully understand how to be safe would be to have the students pass a short quiz, 4 to 5 answers about the safety and rules. And the teacher did go over 4 rules at the beginning of class, and although the student who was injured was not following those rules, they still found the teacher liable because the student had not been exposed to field hockey before. So taking time to have a short quiz, making sure all the students fully understand the rules and safety procedures can help make sure to keep the students safe in this scenario. So then when we look at professional ethics, again with physical education, it's important to make sure that teachers are on the same page, because you usually have more than one physical education teacher at a school, and you typically have multiple within a district. In my district, we have over 20. So creating a set of rules and procedures put in place for students who are missing physical education regularly to make sure that they are feeling comfortable and safe with all the activities. And then also talking about having those quizzes before allowing students to participate in gameplay opportunities to make sure that they are all safe and they all fully understand the rules. This last case deals with a summer school situation, and there was a student who's 10 years old who attended summer school but then left summer school before the end of the day, was crossing at a public intersection and was hit by a motorcycle. The student was taken to the hospital for their injuries, and when the student's mother arrived at the hospital to see her son, then she stated that she sustained emotional and physical injuries as well as a reaction to seeing her son and his physical injuries. So if this happened in my school, the reactive measure would be to take a look at our summer school procedures and see if we can keep the students confined to only a certain number of classrooms in the school, and then only have one exit that didn't have an alarm on it. So if a student went out a side door, an alarm would be sounded, then we'd know that somebody has left the building. The exit that didn't have the alarm would be the main entrance for any students coming in tardy, parents picking up students, anything like that. And that entrance and exit would be monitored throughout the day so that you can see who is coming in or leaving the building. A proactive measure would be to have summer school teachers take attendance at every class and then alert the office right away to any students who are missing. With summer school, you usually have smaller numbers, but it is a unique situation because you don't have as many teachers. So just making sure everybody's on the same page to keep the students safe. And then if a student is missing from class, having the office alert the parents and the guardians and then begin to look for the student either in the school or in the surrounding areas. And then professional ethics, I think it would be important to have a specific system in place for summer school. That way you have these guidelines, and anybody who's coming into summer school as a student or a staff member would fully understand the expectations, but also feel like the rules and procedures are very clearly outlined, which helps protect everybody in this situation. Taking a look at my references, I referenced a teacher's pocket guide to school law, and then there was a couple different court cases that I referenced throughout my presentation. And this slide was made by Slide Carnival, and my photos came from Google. Thank you very much, everyone.